Welcome to Unsilent with your hosts Dave and Brian. This is not another current events podcast. We're digging deeper, diagnosing, and discussing what's really going on today, how we got here, and providing observations for future generations.
Welcome to Unsilent. We're Brian and Dave. We'd love to hear where you think our commentary is spot on and where you think you're completely out in left field. You can do that by visiting unsilentpodcast.com. Rumble's got a great comment section, or any of the social media channels, which are now the digital public square in modern times. So, Brian, what's new? What's exciting? What's engaging and interesting?
Well, I heard there was some protests over the weekend, the No Kings rally, which, again, looking 70 years in the future to the people we're talking to, I suppose it might be a footnote. I don't know. It might be the most revolutionary thing that's ever happened. I don't know. It seemed, seemed comical to me, and for a few reasons. One, the crowds were largely, in the old days, we'd call them blue hairs. I don't know if that's still a thing you're able to do or not even, but I didn't see a lot of young folk, not a lot of 35-year-olds with kids. Not right. It was kind of missing that element for sure. And then there was like a few people who noticed that, like at 2:00 sharp, the vast majority of the crowd just kind of clocked out, so to speak.
I was time to go home and get some dinner.
Yeah, so normally those things kind of I've never been to a thing like that, so I don't know, but by all accounts, those things kind of dissipate more randomly and sporadically and naturally. And this one had a kind of a sharp cutoff time in many locations that was noted. So I thought that was interesting.
Well, I mean, you have to say, though, that maybe they quit early because they were so successful. I mean,
I woke up Sunday morning and we had no Kings. So you can make an argument they were wildly successful.
They apparently accomplished their goal. They got there and then there was a king, I don't know. Anyway, they got there and then they realized there's no kings, and so they went home. So kudos for getting it done so quickly.
So other than that, and the tariff wars, which maybe we'll get into next week, but the ongoing tariff situation, but not a lot in the news, but I did find this it's about a 5-minute video clip, and I thought it'd be kind of fun to just go through it in bits like we've done with some video clips before. This is Victor David Hanson. He is I think they call him Distinguished Fellows at the Hoover Institution.
Yeah.
He's also professor at Stanford. He's very out of place in Stanford, but he's a tenured professor, so he can have that freedom, I guess.
Yeah.
But like you and I talk a lot about the Fourth Turning, which was written by historians and what are demographers and economists, and there's these different components of it. A lot of historians are looking at what's happening now as an unsettling period of time for sure. And depending on their political biases, they land in one camp or the other. So and this is no different. Victor David Hanson's very conservative guy. There's no question. Yeah. His family grew up farming. I mean, he still lives on his family farm. I think that they've had for 4 generations or 8 generations or whatever it is. And but anyhow, I watched this video several days ago, and I thought it was kind of interesting way to look at how we're going through this thing. So I'll share that and play it, and I don't have any particular parts of it earmarked. I decided I'd play it, and we'll just pause when it makes sense to pause, and we'll chat about it as we go here.
Sounds good.
So here he is. Oops. Hold on. Stop. Hold on. I'm so 2020. I don't know how to share, and I have to enable the audio. So forgive me for everyone listening. Now I click the 2 buttons I need to click. All right, here we go.
And they call it the MAGA revolution. It's not a revolution. It is a counter-revolution. There's a big difference. This is a restoration. Let's use the word Trump restoration. We don't really appreciate what we've been through with 8 years of the Obama revolution and the 4-year more radical third term of Obama, using or employing the waxen effigy of Joe Biden. A revolution that we've experienced was a cultural, economic, political, social revolution. It was very similar to the French Revolution, under the Robespierre brothers.
All right, so let me stop there for a second, because this is part of the thing that I found fascinating was, and it's very tribal. If you're on the left side, Trump is the revolution. If you're on the right, Obama was the revolution. Like it's I mean, that's I've never really thought about it in those terms, but it does, after reflecting on this, it does seem that binary.
Sure. Oh yeah.
I'm a guy who voted for Obama the first time, so I didn't have this thought 20 years ago at all. Like, not even a little bit, right? I thought that was a major step forward when he was elected. I absolutely did. I came to change my mind on that stuff, but does that are we oversimplifying it? Am I oversimplifying it?
No, I don't think so at all, because you can see it kind of as a pendulum swing, I think, because certainly Obama, in terms of the swing in policy and focus in the way that the executive operated, that was a very significant, you could say it was definitely a very significant revolution. And then I think it's obvious that I think what Hansen is saying there makes a whole lot of sense, because I've said for a long time that Obama created Trump. I mean, it's the
I would agree.
in one direction is going to cause a equal and opposite swing in the other direction, and I think you can pretty well say that between those two people.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is in hindsight, though, because when Obama won in 2008, there was the what back then was the normal. Oh my God, the country's going to fall apart, but nothing like we see now. I mean, it was just people were unhappy that he won, but nobody was like walking around like this is the end of our democracy. I mean, normal people wouldn't. I should say, like that. You had the fringe in every group that, like, okay, they do that every election. All right, there's a fringe group that thought the democracy ended when Reagan won and when Bush won and when Clinton won. Okay, so I'm not talking about those. Normal, everyday, go to work and like take care of your family, come home and play with your kids, kind of Americans.
Right.
Okay, we lost that one. We're on to the next thing. If they even paid attention that much, which largely I think people look at elections back then as more of a sporting event, which team wins and which team loses, but there was no hardcore, oh my gosh, this is the end. But in hindsight, all these things, they kind of fit into whatever puzzle piece, again, depending on which camp you're in, right?
Well, sure. And I think it's, I think if you go back then, I think if I kind of put myself in my own shoes back then, and I think about, how did I take that election or the election of George Bush before then, et cetera, there wasn't any kind of, I never had a feeling that the entire system was changing. The whole system was kind of getting upended. When Obama was originally elected, I didn't anticipate. I thought, okay, well, he's going to be, a left-leaning guy. He's, saying left-leaning things. I'm a right-leaning guy, so here we go on. We've had a right-leaning conservative or neocon, whatever you want to call him, for 8 years. And now we're going to have this, but the system itself is going to stay what the system is. And I think if you ask anybody today, and do a retrospective of the last the number of years, last two presidents in particular, you could say that the whole system has been upended, and so therefore I can identify what he's with what he is saying with regard to, because the French Revolution. Now, I mean, the French Revolution, of course, was a horrific thing and still has echoes through modern France. Killed 2 million people and led to Napoleon and all this stuff. Afterwards, but it was a complete systemic change. So what Hansen is saying there is very interesting. I'm interested to hear the rest.
I remember. Well, I'll get right back to the video here in a second, but I remember I distinctly remember a conversation at work the day after the Patriot Act was signed into law.
Yeah,
I remember being very upset about that. I don't remember having barely a second or third thought about the Obama election, either one, honestly. I just didn't see that. The Patriot Act to me seemed much more consequential.
Sure.
But again, I was not glued to politics. I barely watched the news, So my point is, it just that the election didn't seem that it wasn't out of the ordinary. It's just like, okay, another election. Like, who cares if it's Bush or Gore? Who cares if it's Clinton or Bush 2 or senior? Who cares? Okay,
right.
All right. Back to Mr. Hansen here. Let's see what else he's got for us. Oops. Push the button again. There we go.
We should remember what they tried to do. They changed the days of the week.
Let me back this up just a little bit here.
Under the Robespierre brothers. We should remember what they tried to do. They changed the days of the week. They renamed things. They tore down statues. They went after the church. Does this sound familiar?
So this is the part where I was like, I know you and I have kind of danced around stuff before. We've kind of talked about it like in passing. But when he said they changed the names of the days of the week,
yeah,
I was like, that's a pretty fundamental thing. When you change like what's a man and what's a woman, and like these are very fundamental. Like you're going for the foundational bedrock kind of ideas that cultures are based upon. And I had never really thought about that deeply. I mean, again, I know you and I like talk about this stuff in passing, but that particular part of this is kind of why I saved it. Like other things we're going to get to, but I just had I never connected the dots on that, how substantial the changes were.
Well, yeah, I think, well, I haven't either, honestly. I mean, I rail against the notions that we're changing all of our language to mean something that it didn't used to mean, the redefinition of things like white supremacy, or the redefinition of fascism, and all these different redefinitions that are going on. But I hadn't really connected it to I mean, that's what did happen in the French Revolution. They essentially wanted to scrap everything that had come before, just burn the whole thing down to nothing, and then redefine everything back into their perfect utopia, their perfect, Robespierre defined utopia.
I think we all just kind of anticipate or expect or accept whatever subjective things would change. Like, okay, what is white supremacy? Well, it depends on who's doing the judging.
Sure.
I mean, in a political sense, a legal sense, a moral sense, everyday life sense. I mean, we all have our biases and our histories and whatever lens we look through, and we all have a different. That's all subjective. I think we all can kind of wrap our heads around this. The difference is when you're renaming the names of the week, of the days of the week, or the genders, those are objective things that we were now like. That is the fundamental shift in my mind. Is it goes from things that you would expect to be subjective. You hope there's alignment and agreement, but you recognize that these are subjective things,
right?
To changing things that are absolutely objective.
Right. And that's certainly there doesn't seem to have been anything in the last number of years that's been off limits to redefine, to change.
Right.
And I guess that's, to me, that's the disturbing part of it, is that if there's no common language, there's no common culture, there's no society. I mean, you're just basically speaking different languages.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing to agree upon. If you can't agree on the name of the day of the week, you can't agree on Tuesday's Tuesday,
right?
Or a man's a man. Like that, it does make any kind of homogenous environment like unlikely at best.
Pretty much impossible. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right, let's see what else he's got here.
Experience. Everything was up for sale. Everything was negotiable. We invented a third gender and rammed it down people's throats. We tore down statues. We said 1776 was no longer the foundational date. It was 1619. We changed the very mechanism that we vote. We went from 70% of the electorate voting on election day to 70% of the electorate not doing that, either through.
All right, that was something that I had not really paid attention to. I mean, again, we see it happening. A lot more people do mail-in voting, but as he's explaining this, and again, he's a good storyteller. He's an endearing personality. So I mean, you can get sucked into somebody who tells a good story and has his calm, rational voice, and like things like that. So I recognize that, but. Again, like in the moment, like, okay, yeah, some people are doing the mail-in thing, but it didn't really occur to me, like, this is a fundamentally different way we do democracy or how we run our republic than we did before. And I never really paid attention to that stuff, honestly.
It's systemic. And so I think, what he's talking about is before we had some agreements on the system, disagreements on how to be successful and execute within the system, but we had at least agreements on here's our system of doing things, and here's how things move forward. And if you, I think if you ultimately eliminate the agreement on the system and the agreement on, again, back to the previous point, anything that we can say, well, here's how we're going to move forward. If you can agree on the basic rules, like the basic rules of voting, which puts people into power, and we see this in little ways too. We've seen, in Congress, just the systemic erosion of how Congress, the Senate, et cetera, operate. We've seen, they're talking now these days. They're talking about eliminating the filibuster so that we can end the shutdown. But it's very arcane, stuff for those that don't pay attention to it. But it's another kind of what's that game where you pull out the sticks and eventually the whole structure collapses.
Oh, Jenga.
Jenga. Yeah. So, I mean, it's sort of like a game of societal Jenga that we keep pulling one stick out and pulling another stick out, and then there's one stick that you've pulled out, doesn't look like it's that significant, and then the whole thing comes collapsing down. Well, that's when you get things like the French Revolution and 2 million people getting killed.
Right. Well, and for most people, I think that they would say, well, mail-in voting is more convenient. You should make it more convenient for voters. All right. Well, but there's a couple of things that are the counterbalance of that, which is, one of them, the lighter version would be if you don't care enough to go vote, you probably didn't care enough doing research about the thing you're voting on. And now that's more of a superficial thing. But the thing that I think most of us, didn't recognize we recognize the risk. I think by and large people recognize the risk that, okay, if people can vote at home, that means somebody can grab grandma's ballot and vote for her the way that they would want in that grant. I think everybody recognized that. I don't think they could imagine the scale upon which it could happen. I think that seemed unfeasible for most of us. Right. I don't remember ever having a thought like, oh my gosh, that could change the vote by, $147,000 or 147,000 votes in the county. I don't remember having that thought. I remember thinking about grandma, the individual, not having her voice represented. I do remember having that thought. I don't ever remember thinking about it at scale, though.
Well, it wouldn't even be possible without the without the kind of great marketing that takes place around, isn't it going to be so much easier, and we're going to get more inclusive voting, we're going to get more people participating in democracy. In order for these kind of changes to take place, there also has to be the ability to downplay, to gaslight on all of regarding the things that could be the risks or could be the dangers. And then there has to be at the same time, the whole, idea of bread and circuses from old Rome. It's like, we're going to do these things. Yeah, we're going to go from a republic to an empire. Palpatine is going to rule, that type of thing from Star Wars. But and we're going to do it by with cheers and with who's winning the Super Bowl or the World Series or whatever, and with rampant entertainment. We're going to send them to the Coliseum and they're going to watch the lions and the gladiators and all of that. So you've got all of that happening simultaneously, because it wouldn't happen if people were really paying attention, right? You wouldn't think through the things you're talking about. Well, I didn't think through this. I didn't, we wouldn't have thought through that because we're so distracted by all the distractions.
Well, and especially in 2008. I mean, 2008, the economic world fell apart. Unemployment was at 12%, I think, in like 2010.
Yeah,
and unheard of since the Great Depression. Like, it was called the mini depression because unemployment numbers had never been like that. People had much bigger things to worry about in their immediate lives than mail-in voting and things.
And of course, that's when that phrase by Rahm Emanuel emerged. Yeah. Don't let a crisis go to waste.
Absolutely.
That's a fundamental, revolutionary idea.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, let's see what else he's got here. Let me back it up just a hair and get where we were there. Okay, there we go.
Percent of the electorate not doing that, either through mail-in or early voting. That was a radical change that had no discussion. It was done by fiat. It was incredible. We looked at girls' sports and we destroyed it. We said that transgendered biological males that were now transgendered females could compete They won over 600 medals they took away from hardworking female athletes. We had drag shows among young children. It was an effort to change the entire Constitution. We forget that. They were trying to bring in Puerto Rico as a state and Washington, D.C. to get 4 instant senators. They were proud. They said that they were going to pack the Supreme Court. It hadn't been tried since 1937.
All right. So again, this part here is like, yeah, okay. I do remember this part being like, okay, you can't do Puerto Rico, you can't do DC, and you can't. The thing that struck me about this part was since the election last year, so now it's almost a year. We're a couple weeks away from a year since the election.
Right.
How much talk have you heard cumulatively about packing the Supreme Court since?
Yeah, no, doesn't happen.
Zero.
Yeah, it doesn't happen at all. Nope.
Yeah. And now the people in Trump, the king in power, supposedly, if you have the court stacked your way, you wouldn't talk about that, obviously, right?
Right.
Now, but before, even if the court was against you, you just knew you had an uphill fight. Like, it's just the way it was. There was not since 1937. We're talking 80 years or 70, 80 years. We had not had a conversation about packing the Supreme Court until this era that he's talking about. I find that timing of that pretty remarkable.
Well, that timing, of course, does correspond with the fourth turning, events that you and I always discuss. So we're talking 80-ish years ago, when the last fourth turning president was FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who then and who proposed. I mean, the last major systemic, wholesale set of changes happened during the FDR. The FDR's time in office. I mean, so we had the Social Security, we had the major social programs, the attempt to go, and there's always that attempt to go too far, like with court packing that they tried to do back then but didn't work. Court packing they tried to do this time but didn't work. All of these different things, again, they're what are they? Signs and signals of the season of the republic that we're in. We're in the down cycle now of this current one, and that's again. You can say that I think it's worth noting. As we've observed in the past, that each one of these fourth turning cycles has brought forth a new type of system, a brand new type of system. Well, not brand new. It still has the Constitution as its underlying, system, and there's still things like free speech that carry through from one to the next. But there's a whole different vibe and a whole different feel and a whole different way of running things from the Civil War era to the era that we're in now after FDR, and likely will be through this next revolution, whatever it ultimately ends up panning out.
But even if you look at what was the free market system, aka capitalism, in 1924, versus 1954, the worlds apart.
Totally.
I mean, absolutely worlds apart. I mean, it's still the same idea theoretically, but radical shifts. And by the way, let's not forget that FDR didn't live to see it, but one of the major things that changed in World War II was the foundation of the OSS, which became the CIA.
Sure.
And that added a whole new wrinkle that is not really covered in the Constitution. It's this kind of agency that has to kind of operate off the radar and do its own thing. You can't know where the money's going because of national security, all that kind of stuff. That added a layer that it was just feels like it was just kind of trial and error. Like, let's just try this and see what happened. And we didn't. And by the way, we didn't take long to use it. We used it in it was the 1948 Italy election. We changed the election of another country like 3 years after we invented this thing.
Well, both in, this is one of the things that's scary about all of it is if you go back and you think about the security state during Lincoln's time, a dude came in to where the president was sitting in, Ford's Theater and shot the president of the United States. I'm sure he had some kind of protection, pretty pitiful.
Yeah.
But the security state has expanded and has taken every moment. So, the last time a president rode in an open vehicle was JFK, and look what happened to him.
Yeah.
Then we've got, you mentioned earlier, the Patriot Act, the quote unquote Patriot Act, that happened after 9/11. So the security state especially through this last this last 80-year secular cycle that we've been in has been advancing and advancing and advancing, both in terms of foreign interventionism and in terms of domestic. I mean, to the point where this last go around with the Biden administration, the attempt of the federal government to control social media and to disfavor certain messages and to parrot certain messages and to even use the security apparatus to say anybody that disagrees with this is guilty of Russian disinformation. So that is one of the things, that's one of the significant differences between the Third Republic, the Third American Republic, and the second First American Republics, which is one of the more ominous.
Well, just one of the very first episodes you and I did of this podcast, we were talking about just how organizations work. And when they get to a certain size, they get so big that preservation of the organization itself becomes the paramount interest. It doesn't matter if you're a bank, if it's Mothers Against Drunk Driving, or a charity organization like that, a company, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the organization is. When it hits a certain size, self-preservation of the organization,
that's the imperative.
It goes everything. It becomes paramount. All right, let's see what else Mr. Hansen's got for us here. Let's see here. Where we pick up? Let me back it up just a couple seconds here. We'll kind of pick up where we left off there again.
Hadn't been tried since 1937, and it was a object of disgrace ever since, but they were proud to try it again. They talked about making states, the Senate, look like the House. They wanted, and a lot of them were advocating it was not fair that one senator in Wyoming, to take one example, is worth 250,000 votes, but a senator in California represented 20 million. They wanted to change the makeup of the Senate. They wanted to get rid of the Senate filibuster. Remember that. They wanted to bring back neo-Confederate nullification. 600 jurisdictions in the manner of South Carolina in 1832 or on the edge of the Civil War in 1860 when neo-Confederate Southern states said the federal government's law does not apply to us.
All right. I think this is the part that, again, I had not really ever connected the dots on historical context, but sanctuary cities.
Sure.
Essentially doing the exact same thing as the entire South did. Again, municipality by, entity by, county by county. I'm sure it didn't happen overnight. I'm sure it did in large scale too. But it didn't just all of a sudden happen where 600 municipalities he's talking about, or districts or whatever, did this thing. It was I'm sure there's a lump sum, and then piece, bit by bit, more and more came. Kind of like what we saw with the sanctuary city thing. Yeah. And then when he said that, I was like, holy crap, that's exactly the same thing. The federal government's laws don't apply here.
Well, and I mean, there was just a news story today, so this is very, relevant to right now, that a number of states have banded together to form a shadow CDC, a shadow public health system. So
Really?
Yeah. This is in today's news cycle in the last 12 hours or so. A number of states, including California, Washington, others have agreed that okay, well, so since the federal government under RFK's leadership is quote unquote anti-science, of course they talk about vaccines, they talk about defunding the CDC and research and firing people, all this stuff. They've essentially agreed to create their own organization, which is a public health bureaucracy, public health, institution that rivals the federal government. Now, if you think, well, it's just health. Well, if you think about it, the reason that's probably even more significant than some of the other things we've talked about is because healthcare in this country, the amount of money that goes into healthcare in this country is it's something like between 7 and 10% of the entire economic output of this of the country is involved in healthcare. So an alternative system, an alternative to the federal government, a separatist federal health system, if you want to call it that, I'm choosing that terminology advisedly, is a huge deal. So we see that, and it's incremental. So all of these things are system by system, incremental. And I thought, as I was listening to the news on that subject, well, there's another pillar that's just fallen. How many pillars have to fall before you have to say, well, we've replaced the feds in this, we've replaced the feds in that. We're not going to obey the federal laws in terms of immigration, in terms of crime. So we got it all already. Let's just call it our own country, shall we?
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. As you said, that 7 to 10% of the GDP or whatever it is healthcare related.
Yeah.
My first thought was, well, no wonder they got the pyramid, the food pyramid wrong. Like it's it's almost like you could say it was intentional.
It was intentional. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
All right, let's see what else Victor's got for us here, and I'll back it up just a few seconds to kind of so we don't gap anything here, but let's see what else he's got.
Apply to us. Tariffs, Yankee tariffs, no, we were going to override them. Andrew Jackson almost invaded the Carolinas over that, South Carolina. And so these jurisdictions said, federal law doesn't apply here. We're exempt. We have our own laws. You cannot, federal immigration law does not apply here. It applies everywhere else to you, but not to us. So this was a revolutionary movement.
All right. So I did not know that. Andrew Jackson almost invaded the Carolinas for not following federal law.
Yeah, no, I was not aware of that either. Actually,
did that sound like anything that might have happened in the last 6 weeks or so?
Oh yeah, it does. It does. It sounds like the entire and look at the where the left has got the courts involved, where the Trump is sending in the federal troops. I mean, yeah, that is fraught with danger. That the whole thing is just fraught with danger because we've been down this road before. We've seen the results of this, and it's not pretty.
Yeah. Interesting. One of the thoughts that I had after I first watched this video, again, this is several days ago, and I haven't really thought about it a whole lot since then. But I remember one of the first thoughts I had was, help me make sense, Dave. Why is it always the conservatives? So the Republican Party was founded to abolish slavery. That was the primary issue that they were founded upon, right? And then immediately they find themselves. I mean, immediately within a few years, they find themselves in the position where they have to keep the republic together when 50-ish% of the republic does not want to be. We want a divorce, and they are in a position where they have to fight. 600,000 men have to die to keep the country united.
Right.
And it doesn't feel that different to me now. Like it feels like the conservative folks, by and large, like, come on, guys, let's just be Americans again. And these factions, now again, geographically it's different. It's Portland and San Francisco and Chicago. It's not the South anymore. Geographically it's different. But if you take away geography, everything else is the same. We don't like your history. We don't like what you're about. We don't like your rules. We don't like your stupid how you want to do things. We think it's all bad for whatever reason. And back then it was because we couldn't have slaves. And now, some would argue that illegal immigration is a big, it's not that much different than slavery. You bring people in for poverty wages and get lots of cheap stuff made. Again, I'm not saying that's the way it is. I'm just saying there's arguments to be made for that. But if you take geography out of the picture, it's exactly the same thing. Like why, Dave, is it the conservatives are always trying to hold it together?
Well, I mean, so it's the basis of conservatism versus utopianism. I'm not going to say liberalism. I'm going to say utopianism. The conservative, mentality is we want to conserve what we see has worked, what we see has is the tradition that's worked. Now you can say, well, what about the American Revolution? Well, the American Revolution looked at it was had a certain little utopian piece to it, but it was also conserving the best parts of the Enlightenment and conserving a whole bunch of what they saw in history as being necessary to form a more perfect union. So it's always about conserving what works and conserving the nation, whereas the utopians say, no, we're not going to conserve anything because we see the flaws in it. So we see the problems with it. And of course there's problems. There's whatever you conserve, you're conserving something imperfect. And so therefore it's going to have problems, And so as a result of that, you're going the utopians, and I'm using that term again advisedly, say, no, we can do it better. So and this is how and utopianism always ends in violence, whether you're talking in Cambodia or you're talking the French French Revolution or you're talking about the Russian Revolution, it always ends in violence because there is no price that is too great to pay for establishing the utopia. So you're not, you take a look, let's take a look at Tsarist Russia. Well, they had a pretty powerful empire, and the Tsar was, oftentimes a jerk. He let the power, Tsar Nicholas, the Romanov family, they lived high on the hog while a bunch of people were starving, and so that wasn't any good. But the focus was not on how can we preserve Russian culture and change it for the better. How was completely trashed. The utopians always want to wipe it all out, wipe everything out, start with a clean slate, and belief that if you start with a clean slate, you can build a clean thing. The reality is that you can never start with a clean slate and build a clean thing. You're going to start with a clean slate, and you're going to make compromise after compromise after compromise, and you can end up with Maoist China. Mao was a utopian as well. They're always the utopians versus the conservatives.
I would argue that in every one of those cases you cited, it was utopia for a few people.
Well, sure, it's utopia for the people.
I think things turned out pretty well for Mao. If you were in his family, you probably did pretty good.
You bet. Yeah, it's always utopia for the people that win. Absolutely.
I looked it up real quick when you first were talking about the Revolutionary War and why that's a little bit different. I don't even know why I looked this up. I couldn't remember the percentage of tax that it was that prompted the Boston Tea Party. Do you remember how much that was, Dave?
It's like 2 cents or something, 2% or something.
3%, 3 pence per pound, which was equivalent to 3% of the tea's value. That sparked that was like the last straw. It was 3%.
3%. Yeah, 3%.
If you live in California and you're making over, let's say $500,000 a year, you're paying like 57%.
Yeah, exactly. You're paying most of your money to the government for the privilege of living there. So they can
anyhow, so we talk about like how free markets and capitalism and whatever has evolved. Like it's been a slow trickle. Like again, you look at capitalism in 1924 versus 1954. I mean, wildly different, but they went after the King's Army over 3% on tea. Not even 3% across the board, just 3% on tea.
Yeah, well, it was tea, and they had the bourbon tax before. Yeah, so it's your drinks. The drinks.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's
crazy.
My
gosh. All right, let's see. Let's pick up with mixed hands. It cracks me up how much we've changed anyhow. All right, let me back it up a few seconds here so we don't miss anything he says here, and I'll kick it off again. Here he goes.
This was a revolutionary movement. Movies were different. Sports were different. Take a knee. And Donald Trump came in, and it was not sufficient to say we're going to stop the madness of $37 billion. We're going to stop the madness of being short 40 or 50,000 military recruits because of this DI, coupled with the humiliation in Kabul. We're going to stop the appeasement of China. But that wasn't all. He said, the government is broke. We're going to go through all of these agencies. And finally, for the first time in the history of this country, when somebody says they're going to cut federal spending and drain the swamp or cut the administration, we're going to do it.
All right. So to me, it seems like the thing that is really the 3% tea tax for the powerful progressives, not your everyday people who go to church or don't go to church and go to school, whatever it is. The powerful people, it seems to me that this is the crossing the Rubicon. You can talk all the things you want to talk about. You cannot stop the spending of tax money on our pet projects.
Right.
Now, I would argue that probably in many cases that's because their friends or them some indirectly way are making money off it. Can't prove any of this stuff. Could be a conspiracy theory. I don't know. But that seems to me, out of all this stuff, that seems to be the line in the sand that Trump crossed. That it was the absolute no. You can all these things like historians or politicians said all through history. We're going to cut. Fine, campaign on that. But if you're going to do it, you got to pay.
Well, yeah, and I think the reason is even more than their friends are getting paid. And there's the NGOs and the nonprofits, et cetera, had billions and billions and billions funneled to them. I mean, of course, there's the whole Solyndra thing back in the day that ended up going out of business. There's green energy company that Obama funded. So there's all that, and that's a reality. I think the bigger the bigger impediment or the bigger reason that it freaks out the left. I mean, I have friends I talk to, it's like, he's got a USAID. And I'm like, okay, well, what does USAID do? Tell me what you think ASC did. She's firing federal workers. Okay, well, what are the federal workers?
It's called U.S. aid, Dave. Obviously, it's aid for people who need aid.
It must be aid. It's a nice name, right? It's U.S. That's United States aid. So, but the real, even though a lot of people can't articulate,
heartless, Dave. You're heartless, I tell you.
I know. I'm just a conservative. What can I say? The real thing that freaks them out is the fact that if you cut these things now, then they're not going to be there when Trump is gone and they're back in power. So if you defenestrate the beast, if you just take the whole thing down, then it's not only that your friends aren't getting paid now and they have to go ahead and get a real job. It's the fact that the system that has sustained you for 70 years with money flowing from the taxpayers through organizations, through nonprofits into the bank accounts of the people that run those nonprofits, or that go into government and then get onto the news circuit and get to be commentators. Look how many of the people in media used to work in the federal government, right?
Yeah.
That's
or at General Dynamics or Boeing, or insert.
Yeah, exactly.
Insert Fortune 500 company here, or especially insert defense company here.
Lobbyist, law firm, whatever it happens to be. Once you destroy that system, once you tear that building down, then it's going to be a lot harder if and when, then it's probably a matter of time before somebody from the Democrat Party is running the whole show again. I mean, it's just we go back and forth in this thing, assuming the whole system doesn't collapse around us. Then you don't have the ability to just sort of re-enable, just turn back on all the programs again that we're funding your friends and yourself and your retirement and your career plans. So I think that's the big part of it, the big reason that there's this big pushback, and the big reason that the masses on the left are activated without really knowing why they're activated.
Well, and I think all the things you just said are true. I think that really it's I talked about their friends are getting paid, and you're right, though. It's really that their friends are in power, and their friends hold more power than elected officials. The bureaucracy is more powerful than the elected people.
Absolutely.
That is a system that you cannot cross. You cannot cross the line where you make the elected people more powerful than the machine.
Right. Yeah. It's fine if you get into power and you pass some bills or pass some laws, and you pass your right-wing laws.
Yeah, you decide which bridge gets built and which one doesn't. You can tweak the tax code 3% here, 2% there. Fine.
Yeah, you can live with that. Yeah, you can live with that, but you can't live with
eliminating entire departments or sections of entire departments where we hold all the power. No, you have to go.
Right, exactly. And I think that's the cardinal sin of television, the Trump regime.
And by the way, I would argue that is conservatism. It's going back to how it was supposed to be and how it worked, and now it's not working. Like, again, people in California paying 50-something% of their income goes to taxes. That's insanity. It should be criminal. Like, it's wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's let him wrap it up here. I think we have about 40 seconds left here, and again, I'll back it up, so we'll hear a little bit of it again, but I don't want to skip over it.
Or cut the administration. We're going to do it, and there's going to be no changing names except to go back to traditional names. And we're not going to topple statues. And if you break the law and you're on campus and you're on a student visa, you're going to go back home. So we're in the midst of a counter-revolution. It's not revolutionary. You know what it is? It's a return to normalcy. It's a return to common sense. It only looks revolutionary to revolutionaries. But to the rest of the people, it is a counter-revolution to restore normalcy and bring the country from the far left fringes back home again.
All right. Well,
interesting.
Anyhow, I know that we don't usually dive into those videos like that, but I thought that was a pretty fascinating take on the whole thing. And these historians have so much more context than my feeble brain can possibly muster. That I just thought there was some good stuff in there.
Oh yeah, it's fascinating that when you step back, I mean, what he says is just everything that people have said this before. If you look at everything that Trump is doing now, and you were to put a name on it, say 40, 50 years ago, it'd be like, oh, well, he's kind of a center-left Democrat,
Yeah, 100%.
He wouldn't be considered like a rock-ribbed conservative back in Reagan's
I
day.
can't draw a meaningful distinction between his policies and Bill Clinton's.
Yeah,
on not just about anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Including immigration, by the way.
Right. And so, I mean, even the things that, even there's a bunch of course, it's always fun to watch the original Obama clips where Obama talks about immigration and he said, no, you got to come in this country legally. And, I mean, so even going back 15 years, 20 years, what is thought of now as outrageous is really a return to normalcy, a return to kind of centrist, and I think we're talking centrist values. We're not talking hardcore right-wing values. We're talking centrist values, center left, center right, whatever you want to call it. That's really, and so it is a counter-revolution. I would agree. Far be it for me to disagree with VDH, but I think he's right on track with that.
All right. Well, we're going to end a few minutes early because Dave and I are recording back to back this week because I'm traveling next week. So as Dave said at the beginning, if there's anything you said that we got especially right or especially wrong, we'd love to hear your feedback. We're trying to explain to future generations what this moment in time feels like, as they will undoubtedly look back and wonder what the hell is wrong with those people. So until next week, this is Dave and Brian signing off.
See you next week.
Do you want to be unsilent? Make your voice heard on our social media channels and share where you think we got it right or wrong. Go to unsilentpodcast.com for social links so you can join the discussion.